We are recording, right? Okay. Welcome to Oh Brother, Not Another Podcast. We are an official Apple podcast, and we're on Stitcher and Spotify and all those other places. And I am Brother Miggs Burrows.
And I'm Trace Burrows. And today we have on the show Jim Messina, musician, producer, engineer. I didn't know you were those other things, producer and engineer, who's been in several, really well-known groups, like Buffalo Springfield, Poco, and he was half of the rock duo Loggins and Messina. Maybe you're best known for that. I'm not sure. Sold over 20 million records with Loggins, Kenny Loggins. And I had a question about that. It almost became Fogelberg and Messina instead of Loggins. Do you want to tell us how that went down?
Well, it was an interesting situation because I had just signed a deal with Columbia Records as an independent producer, and they had been giving me a number of artists. My first artist was Andy Williams, who I grew up with and loved. But I said, look, I'm pretty young to be doing him, and he needs a lot more, especially experience in orchestrations and stuff. And so that was a privilege to be asked, but I couldn't. Olivia Newton-John was another artist that was sent to me, and I loved what she was and what she was doing. But again, I just did not feel I was the right producer to produce the kind of music that I think she needed to go in commercially. And then Dan Fogelberg showed up, and I was really pleased about that. In fact, I recently realized, now that I live in Nashville, who it was that sent him to me. It was Bonnie Garmer, who worked for Columbia in artist development. And we were talking, and I was really enjoying what he had to say and what he was doing. And I said, before we go any further, I said, there's one question I need to ask you, which is important to me. And I said, why would you choose me to be your producer? What is it about me that makes you feel like I can do a great job for you? And he said, well, to be honest with you, he says, I love Poco. And he says, I want to make a Poco record. And at that moment, I just went,
oh, brother.
Well, you know what? I said, look, I made $125 a week at best. I said the music was too country for rock stations and too rock for country stations. We could not get any airplay, even though we could sell out any house. I said, I just don't want to go down that road again. I think you need to find somebody else. So by this time, I had run out of options. I was getting pretty close to the end of the year, and I'd already been paid to work. And during my Poco, last days with Poco in the summertime, I had met a guy named Don Ellis who was working for Clive Davis and Artist Development. And he said, hey, listen, I have a friend of mine, Dan Loggins, who has a little brother, and we really think he's talented. And would you be interested in hearing him? And I said, look, I got an album to finish. It's summer. I said, let's wait till the end of the year. I'll be finished with Poco and available to start, doing other things. So that was my first introduction to Kenny Loggins. So there you go.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of which, are you having a reunion? Is that still on for July at the Hollywood Bowl?
I think so. It's July 15th and 16th at the Hollywood Bowl. We're going to do a couple of nights there. And Kenny's got a new book that he's releasing. And recently Top Gun has come out again, and they're using his song. So this will be a wonderful time for him to promote that, and a wonderful time for me as a solo artist, because I'm out performing, 8 to 14 shows a month, and a new band of 5, and I'm just having more fun now than I ever did.
So when you get together with Kenny Loggins in July, and both of you guys probably have hundreds of songs together, outside of this, duo and all the projects you've done, how do you guys decide on a set list? How does that work out? You work well together and just...
Well, it's already been decided. Kenny really didn't want to do this show, not so much Hollywood Bowl, but just go out, because where he's at in life right now, he had this book he was coming out with. He had, the Top Gun thing that he needed to help promote. And to do a full evening of Loggins and Messina really is an hour and a half to 2 hours. So I said, why don't we do this? Why don't we make this work for both of us? I suggested, instead of a Loggins and Messina show, what about doing an evening with Kenny Loggins and Jim Messina sitting in? We'll go back to the early days of what we did, put together a 60-minute set that would allow you to put together a 60-minute set. We'll do that as a set. You do you as a set. You can promote your show. You can, we can do what we're doing together, and let's see what happens, because it's a lot more difficult these days to travel. In many ways, I mean, just the cost of fuel is exorbitant. Having 3 semis out on the road and committing to 60 to 80 dates, while that might not be much in some people's books, it's a killer. And I personally much would prefer to do something similar to what we're doing at the Bowl. Pick out 5, 6, 7 engagements a year. Do the Bowl, do Jones Beach. Do things like that, and let the promoter put it all together. Nowadays, a lot of these places have their sound systems, they have crews, they have everything. Let us just come in, do what we do best, do a show, and have fun. To me, that's the ideal way. And I'm hoping that if this show turns out the way it should, that will give both of us the feeling and the freedom of, this doesn't have to be a great big extravaganza. It can be a wonderful evening with us doing what we do, and let the boys who get paid to be, crew and soundmen do their job there at the venue. I mean, that's my take on it.
The backstory is so incredible, and you've told it in a few different venues, but, where you first met Kenny Loggins and he comes over to your house, he doesn't, and you're ready to, listen to him, and where's your guitar? Oh, I didn't bring my guitar. Where's your, he doesn't have anything. He's just not prepared. And you give him one of your guitars, right, to play. And the whole thing was like, I think people don't appreciate the fact that you sort of mentored and shepherded him, and you were a reluctant partner, right? In terms of initially.
Yeah, I just didn't really want to go back on the road. I was tired of it. And, but again, he was hard to figure out in the beginning, because again, he was poor. He didn't have the funds and the money. And quite honestly, from what I recall, later on, he had a guitar, but he was embarrassed. It was not something he wanted to drag out of the coffin, I think. But that said, I really felt that once I started working with him, he was really gifted. At first, it was just, he had a lot of folk songs. He had Danny's song and House of the Corner. Hey, we were already into Dave Mason and Delaney and Bonnie and Leon Russell, and things were cooking in rock that was so much different than what it felt at the time that he was still in the folk days. But what really intrigued me after I just decided to spend a little time with him more and bring him back, even at first, I just didn't think he had what it took. There was something about him, and what it was is his voice. He was able to take, like I asked him, I said, so what are you doing to make a living? He said, well, I work for ABC publishing company, and I'm there because, they need a Leon Russell song or an Elton John song. He can make his voice sound like that, which is what he thought he needed to do to get it. And he had fun doing it. And there was a humor, a playfulness, a willingness to do something other than what he had presented to me that intrigued me. And I also, gave him some instruments when he would come over to play with, because I wanted to know how well he could play. Could he play? Because he didn't have a guitar when he showed up. And I just became more and more intrigued with who he was as a person. And as I started realizing that I think there was something here, especially as a vocalist, I started pulling together, Al Garth lived below me in the apartment where my former wife and I lived. Merle Bergani and Larry Sims were in the Sunshine Company, and they'd opened for Poco, so I knew they were available because the band had disassembled. And Michael Mardian, who was actually a friend of Kenny's, was open and available to help us. So I began putting his band together and picking the tunes, and I knew he needed something other than the Pooh Corner and the Danny song to really make it. So I'd had some songs started with Poco. Listen to a Country Song was one of them. The Trilogy was something that I had been writing. And I just thought, you know what, let me see what his voice sounds like on other material. And Michael Mardian was working with him to help him get a tune called Rock and Roll Mood together, which gave him another diversification. What really intrigued me about moving forward with Kenny after all of what I just said was I never wanted to get stuck again in a situation like I did with Poco, where your music is so typecast that there's the possibility that it will be too rock for country, or too country for rock, or too pop for. So I decided Kenny had the voice, because he liked to do it, to sing a lot of different type of songs that he was inspired originally by hearing other artists do and copying their vocal tones. The key was getting him to get his own vocal tone and get this diversification of material, which he began to move into very, very quickly. And once the diversification came there, I began to see the ability for him to sell to a greater number of people other than just country, rock, pop, or whatever, but the whole enchilada, so to speak. Mm-hmm. So that was the problem then was he didn't have an agent, he didn't have a manager, he needed a lawyer, he needed a lot of things. And selfishly speaking, and I don't know if I've ever admitted this, but I wanted this thing to be a success. And if you don't sell records, if you don't get out there and play, it's just not going to happen. And so that's when I had suggested to Clive Davis, reluctantly, how about doing an album and as Kenny Loggins with Jim Messina sitting in? That would allow me to be there to help him with the band, get things organized, get him an agent, actually get him a manager first so that they could pick an agent. And actually create a team that could work together to hopefully make this a success. And there's no guarantee, there never is. I mean, no matter how perfect of a team you put together, but sometimes things just click in. And I was able to really put together a great group, a great team of professionals to support him, to get him going.
When your voice is blended, at what point couldn't that even be the initiative for putting you two together? Is your voices blended so well, or did that almost become like a surprise afterwards?
Well, it was really more of a surprise afterwards because Kenny is a great singer. I don't consider myself a great singer, but for some reason, when we were working together, we would have fun and we'd sing Everly Brothers songs or something, and I would take the low part and he'd take the high part. And one of our first engagements was, which was really just to help out my father-in-law, who's one of his children were at a state hospital, was to go do a little benefit to raise money for the kids. And so that was our first time to sit down with two guitars. So we were forced into learning Danny's song and forced into learning these songs. I don't even remember all the songs we did. Oh, there's only 3 or 4, and I'm sure one of them was the Everly Brothers. But that's where our voices began to blend. And it wasn't until really we did the Sittin' In album, and I was just there really as a support artist, that people began to like the way we sounded together. So that was quite a surprise, to be honest with you.
Oh, I thought maybe
it still is a surprise because I remember when Kenny and I in 2004 had decided we were going to do the reunion in 2005. He asked me to sit in with him at a benefit he was doing in Santa Barbara for Christmas Unity. And I was doing another benefit for the Sheriff's Council, and I rushed over to do this. And we sat down, we did 3 or 4 songs. And later he said, it was the first time he realized in his life that no matter who he sings with, whether it's Michael McDonald or Christopher Cross or anybody, as is the case with me, when we sit down together and sing, that blend just never happens unless it's us, And like the Everly Brothers. I mean, they were both individually just really wonderful singers and stuff. But boy, when they sang together,
Yeah,
it was magic.
so before we forget, you're playing at Sacred Heart University Community Theater on June 23rd at 7:30. So hurry up, viewers, and get.
Where am I at?
Am I wrong? Correct me if I made a mistake. Sacred Heart University Community Theater on
In
June.
Fairfield, Connecticut.
Oh, yes. You had to say Fairfield for me to get it.
That's just down the street from us. We live in Westport, Connecticut. So
Down over.
yeah.
Well, I'm going to be bringing my band of 5, which is basically drums, keyboards, sax, bass, myself on guitar. And we'll be doing an array. My set right now, which is going to change probably in 2023, but my set right now consists of some Springfield, some Poco, some Loggins and Messina, some of my solo works. And it does start out acoustic. And by the end of the show, we're going to be getting into some real Latin jazz. And
Yeah.
I've got some great players that I love working with. So it's going to be fun.
So I used to listen to the Buffalo Springfield record all the time. I remember back, it was a 68 or whenever it was, I was at my friend's house, and that was always the record they put on.
Which one was that? Do you remember?
I don't remember it. So
Remember any of the songs?
No, I just remember I really liked it. That's all I remember.
Too stoned to remember.
If I gave you a
Don't
title,
remember. I saw it.
if I gave you a title, would it cause your earphones to do this? Maybe.
You'd have to rattle.
What about Kind Woman? Do you remember that song?
I'm so bad with names, and I just remember I loved listening to it, and for some reason, and it made me feel good.
Well, so to make you feel better, if you show up to the show, that is, we'll be doing like Kind Woman off of that. That was one of the first songs, and I do that mainly because we've lost Rusty Young, who was in Poco now. He passed about a year or so ago. I first met Rusty having been in New York recording and producing the Buffalo Springfield. And one of the songs that we did was Kind Woman. I bring that up because Neil and Stephen were supposed to be there, and Dewey, and I don't think Neil ever got on the plane. And Stephen, the day of the session, I think he got lost down in the village. It's easy to do. And again, Dewey Martin, we all know him as a spiritual human being, and really indulging in the spirits, and showed up very spirited and unable to perform. So that left me in a position where Eric Mardin said, listen, I'll get you the best jazz musicians in town, and we'll get this going. So he did. And the problem is they were the best jazz musicians, and that was not the album I was recording. Anyway, they did a great job. I brought it back to LA, and I told Richie, I said, this isn't working. It's good, but it's not Buffalo Springfield. I mean, even though Neil did Broken Arrow and had that jazz group on the end of it and all that stuff, which was more of a montage of music, this was one of Richie's songs, and it needed to be him. So I said, what about hiring a steel guitar player? I said, there's Red Rhodes, there's Buddy Emmons, there's Sneaky Pete. And it happened to be that our guitar tech at the time, Miles Thomas, said, hey, I know a guy in Colorado named, Rusty Young, and he's your age. And, we get an airplane ticket, and, they're only $35 and the hotel rooms were $20. It'd be a lot less expensive than hiring a triple scale guy. So we did. We brought him out, and that was when I first met Rusty Young, and he put that wonderful steel guitar part on Kind Woman, which I later learned at his memorial that he started out learning to play steel guitar as a jazz player. That's where you start in steel guitar if you're serious, as where you start in classical music if you're a pianist. So I learned at that memorial that he had studied jazz. So when he sat down on that session, Kind Woman, that had jazz players on, he was quite comfortable enough. He had a broken steel guitar, broke on the plane. I gave him Stephen Steele's steel guitar that was in the back, which was kind of a wreck, and one of the necks was broken on it. So he chose the C9 neck, which is a jazz neck, and he played the solo. And it blew my mind. And years later, we listened to some of that stuff that we had done, and we both were amazed that we could even play that well. And then the last album I did, which is still out right now with Rusty, was called Jim Messina in the Groove, featuring Rusty Young. And we performed Kind Woman, Child's Claim to Fame. We did You Better Think Twice. We did Follow Your Dreams from Poco. And then 2 songs from Loggins and Messina, which were Listen to a Country Song and Holiday Hotel. Those 2 songs were the songs I had started writing when I was in Poco. So I asked him, I say, hey, why don't we have you play on that? And then we'll tell the audience this is what we would have sounded like if I had stayed in Poco. Mm-hmm. So we did that. And it was a fun album. People really love it. And so one of the reasons why I'm still doing that song in my set to pay honor and tribute to Rusty.
What made Buffalo Springfield breakup? Just a personality sputting up against each other, or why did that happen?
Well, when I was there, I didn't see any of that stuff. I never saw any fussing or fighting or squabbling. They were all professional in the studio. There was a silence that kind of existed. They didn't seem to want to work together. And there could be a multitude of reasons for that. You'd have to ask each person as to what they thought it was. From my standpoint, being 19 years old, they were great cats, man, but they were like herding cats. Get them into one place at one time. The few times that we did, that was definitely magical. But I think it's very similar to maybe what happened with Kenny and I, is that you get to a point in a relationship, a musical direction, where people start to change. They start to grow into different interests. Kenny was starting to really fall more into a pop field, which is where he eventually led to. That was his desire. I think he always saw himself as a pop artist, which is one of the reasons why he wrote songs for many different pop artists. He's inspired by that. For me, I'm an artist, but I'm also a producer, and I view myself not as a rock star, but as an artist. I'm also a fine painter. I've got stuff getting ready to show in the Van Gogh Immersive here in Nashville. I love woodworking. I have a full wood shop, a full metal shop. Nice. I have a full studio that I used to. So for me, it's a way of life. It's not something that I'm looking, to do. And I think with the Buffalo Springfield, Neil was needing to be a solo artist. Kenny wanted to be a solo artist. That's what he started out to be. So at some point in time, when you have these goals and you're diverted in other directions, there's a need to change. Sometimes it's a violent change. Sometimes it's amicable. It just depends on the personalities and how mature and grown up we are at the time we decide to make those changes.
You're into Gestalt. You had mentioned in one of the interviews. Is that something you what did that do for you, or what is Gestalt's kind of an in the now thing, right? The power of now.
Well, no and yes. I decided at one point in time I thought I was going to leave the music business and become a Gestalt practitioner. So I studied with some of the best people, and Big Sur, and the Esalen Institute was really the place where that all began with Fritz Perls. And I was very inspired by what that process did, and how they don't believe in being therapists. They think they take the word therapist and look at it as the rapist. They look at to sit with somebody and facilitate and be able to get them to come out. The key with Gestalt practicing is to leave somebody in their conflict so that they can know what it is that's bothering them. And there's a whole process that it takes to get there. I studied that for about 5 years and was thinking about getting ready to maybe even go back to school to get a legitimate education in it. But I realized after having worked with some folks in workshops that, first of all, I got left with a lot of the stuff that they were feeling and doing. And then I learned that I had to do work for myself to just get rid of that. And during the process of it, I started missing, writing and doing music. And I realized that process, if I used it on myself, it helped me to learn to write and to get music out a lot better than I had in the first place, which beginning from my solo album with Oasis was, I think if you look at the lyric moving forward, much of my lyric had changed and become deeper and more emotional than it had been in the past. So I went in and used that process to develop a workshop called the Songwriters Performance Workshop. And my mini thesis on that was about how to take that template and Gestalt and move it into being able to use it to creatively create the ability to go from your emotions to your feelings, where it divides in the brain's thoughts and images, and verbally learn how to communicate that and have it being received by a listener who also hears it, either gets pictures or thoughts about it, either feels it and has an emotional reaction, which is a core to core. So I rewrote the process to work for songwriting, not therapy, and to be able to have people learn how to write songs, not hit songs, but songs that hit another human being in a way which they wanted it to have the affect.
Now, can anybody learn that? I'm not a musician, I'm not a songwriter, but let's say I can write a good short poem. Could I? Is that, it's like comedians. People say, well, you can't really learn to be a comedian if you're not funny, inherently funny. And I mean, can you just write? You can't really write a good song if you just don't have it in you, right? I mean,
well, my workshop, the Songwriters Performance Workshop, was also for poets. And again, I would have the same process that I used to get my participants to learn how to connect with their emotions and their feelings. That's why the process, when you get to the point where let's say we all have these emotional experiences that are stored into us, whether it's divorce or parent issues or whatever they might be, girlfriends. Well, they get stored in here and you don't know. And all of a sudden they kind of get this feeling. You don't know what the feeling is, but you have this feeling, and then an emotional reaction, I should say. And then it comes out as a feeling. You begin to feel and relate to what that feeling is. Does it feel like abandonment? Does it feel like love? Does it feel like both? And then all of a sudden, the next process of the state of awareness comes into, you have thoughts or pictures in your mind, and then you need to verbalize it. Now, in that verbal state of awareness, you may not be a singer and you may not be musically inclined, but you can use your words to express your feelings. And that's why it works in poetry too. So yes, you don't have to be a musician or a singer to have feelings and emotions and be able to paint pictures with words. You just have to have the ability and the awareness to write it down and then push it back in and say, does this have any meaning? And in my workshops, that's why, when I work with people, I say, I don't want to know whether you like it or you don't like it. In fact, don't tell me. I want the person who's sitting next to you in your workshop to tell me, what did you experience when you heard this? Did you have an emotional reaction to it? Did you have any feelings? Did you get any pictures? Did you get any thoughts? Did it do anything at all? That's what we need to know, not whether you like it or not, right? So as a poet, it helps give poetry some standing as to whether people are feeling it or reacting to it. And then what we would do is put music behind it, kind of like you would do a score in a movie with dialogue, so that the poet would have some support and they would have this music that I would ask the students in the room to compose, to give a mood to what it was that poet just said in their poem. And then that would give them the ability, again, another step into saying, well, what if you did get a script and somebody did want you to write, some music for this, to score it. Now you're getting the experience to take the words and learning how to take and make music. that you didn't create the words, but they're going to make you have feelings. Where do you use a dark chord? Do you use a minor? Do you use a major? Is it upbeat? Is it the blues? You know, or is it classical? You know,
That's great. I mean,
all good stuff.
it kind of probably applies to all the arts in a way. I mean,
Absolutely.
Trace, you have a wrap up?
You still look for talent, like you'd like to produce someone who's up and coming that you feel you can add to the career with your producing skills. You ever look like, you know, going to local concerts or clubs and find someone and go, oh, I could make.
I'm not looking for it like I used to.
Mm-hmm.
I'm focused now more on myself as an artist. I want to do for me what I did for Kenny and Richie and Steven and Neil. I felt at a time it's time for me to do that. That's my focus. That doesn't mean if I see somebody and I think they're worthy of it. In fact, when I first moved to Nashville, I did find somebody that I thought that was worthy of it. But what I didn't want to do is what I did with Kenny, which is to jump in there and help him do every aspect of it, because I don't know that necessarily works for everybody. And I don't know in the end whether somebody resents you for it. The important thing is to get them to learn how to do it for themselves. And I did help this person take them down this step. But when it got to the point where we needed to go to somebody for a record deal, I explained to them, you know, they may not accept you at this place and they may not accept you at the other place. This was really more in Nashville. Mm-hmm. But if they don't, that doesn't mean it's game over. That means we go to New York, or we go to Los Angeles, or we go to a place where there's a record label who cares about you and wants to support you. And that was a deal breaker. They go, oh, no. If I can't do it here, I don't want to. Mm-hmm. And so that tells me right off the bat, okay, that's fine. But that means that person's not going to go all the way. Mm-hmm. And if I'm going to get involved with somebody to help them in their career and help myself as a producer, I want to know that I got a partner. Kenny was a partner all the way. He wasn't experienced, but he was willing. He went every step of the way with me as an artist, note for note, song for song, town to town, everything. He was committed. And that's the kind of commitment that it takes to be successful.
Yeah. As they say, you know, 90% of success is showing up.
Like the king.
Thank you.
Showing up and not stoned. Showing up and not stoned.
Yeah, not stoned, not like Dewey. All right, yeah. Don't do what Dewey does.
Don't do what Dewey does. He doesn't do it. Right.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much. This is great. Just to repeat, at June 23rd, which is a week from Thursday, this podcast will air in a couple of days, but Thursday, June 23rd at the Community Theater in Fairfield,
Sacred
Connecticut.
Community Theater.
Yeah, Sacred Hearts Community Theater, and which is a beautiful old restored movie theater.
This is in Fairfield, right?
Yeah, Fairfield, Connecticut. Yeah, it's a great theater. And July 15th, 16th at the Hollywood Bowl with Loggins and Messina reunion of sorts. And thank you so much for taking the time.
Thanks a lot.
My pleasure, guys. Thank you for getting me away. I mean, I realized that I'm sitting here and I go, I got a Zoom meeting and it was 9:45. I'm like, oh my God, I haven't even showered. Showered, cleaned, do my hair, and covered my puffs, and
no demerits for that. That's right.
All right, guys. Thank you so much for a great.
Thanks a lot, Jim.